You want to buy some death sticks?
You don't want to sell me death sticks.
I don't want to sell you death sticks.
You want to go home and listen to Slushy Stop.
I want to go home and listen to Slushy Stop.
Hello and welcome back to Slushy Stop. My name is Nathan and I am joined once again by Alex and Jake, where we are talking about Star Wars. We are going through each episode, 1 through 6, one by one, just having casual conversations around them, leading up to a grand finale where we are going to play Star Wars Trivial Pursuit against each other to see who is the Jedi Master of Star Wars trivia. So welcome to the program, gentlemen.
Hello.
What's up, dude?
Oh, not much. Just, I guess still trying to recover from that episode 1 podcast we did last time.
That episode 1 slump. Sad trombone.
I'll still defend it to an extent.
I'm gonna drop a bombshell right here.
What's that?
To lead off the episode. I think I might like episode 2 more than episode 1.
Ooh, bold statement from Alex. Rebuttal, Jake.
That's fair. To each their own. I mean, it's one of those things. Like I said the last time, as someone who does like Phantom Menace, who does favor that movie, it's very difficult to argue a lot of the critiques of it because a lot of them are indeed correct, and a lot of my attachment to the movie is probably solely based on nostalgia. Mm-hmm. But I think the movie has lots of strong points.
Sure.
But the spots where it comes up short, it comes up very, very short. So,
and to a certain extent, we're going to have some similar conversations about this one. For those of you who either didn't read the title or anything like that, we're going to be talking about Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones today. So, your thoughts, Alex?
Attack de los Clones. I have a couple of thoughts that I've been looking forward to sharing with you. I have been very vocal in my loathing of the prequels, and particularly, I think I've probably said on the record multiple times that episode 2 is my least favorite of all the movies and the one that is the worst and that I hate the most. And I went back and watched it this last time, trying to remove all prior experiences, all prior thoughts and feelings, and come at it with fresh eyes. And I gotta say, it's not as awful as I remember. I found myself watching it and feeling at times like I could see the potential greatness of this movie kind of peeking through the clouds. There are some ridiculous plot holes in this movie. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's a good movie. Ridiculous plot holes, and things that make no sense at all. I still have no idea who Master Sifo-Dyas is, or was, or what he did, or what his role was. Still can't figure out who deleted the Camino system from the Jedi archives. Still can't figure out if Dooku was secretly trying to get Obi-Wan to join him and overthrow Sidious. But overall, I gotta say, like, the movie is not as awful as I have always thought it was. It does some things really well, and I need to give it a little more credit than probably I have in the past. And I might even like it better as a Star Wars film than The Last Jedi.
Now that is a much easier argument for me to agree with.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I guess part of what makes this movie frustrating is, I mean, there are definitely those times where it has so much potential, where, yes, you can see what George Lucas was going for. And you even have some, fun moments, like, as much as it may not make sense. Like, I still remember, watching Yoda's lightsaber battle at the end, and just how, like, fun that is. I mean, it may not fit that character very well, but still, it's just fun to see him in his peak, flipping around all over the place, showing why he is a master of the Force. And there are other,
Yeah.
fan service moments, I would say, throughout it. But then you have sprinkled in just equally terrible things, whether it's that love story or just Anakin being himself. And there's even just some parts where, like, I know we were talking about this earlier, but there are parts where, like, you have action happening, but you don't care about it at all. So it's just boring, and you're just like, can we get past this so we can get on to the things that I actually do care about? Like, I would rather watch some of the stupid love crap than this pointless, like, and it's also just like a bunch of CGI on the screen too.
Yeah,
So you just
for
get
sure.
fatigue after a while.
I gotta say, the love story, which I used to just absolutely loathe. I found myself this time. I think maybe I'm going soft as I get older, but like it's not. It makes sense. I think that's the thing. The love story actually makes sense. There are definitely moments that probably should have been omitted and edited out. I think we could have, as viewers, we would have understood that they were falling in love without some of the ridiculous, terribly written dialogue between the two of them, particularly on Naboo. But I think that one of the interesting things about Anakin, and we were talking about this earlier, is, he was taken away from his mother when he was a little bit older than most Jedi kids, or Force-sensitive kids. Mm-hmm. So he has this attachment, and that attachment is what makes him vulnerable. And that vulnerability is what allows that, Padme relationship to develop. And probably that's not bad for him, really. She is fulfilling something, but that vulnerability is also what we see Palpatine later take advantage of. So, like, I have to give George Lucas a little more credit than I have in the past. It's kind of fun, and it's actually pretty interesting to see Anakin in this film as kind of a tortured young adult, and we see him definitely skewing toward the dark side at times, but not skewing toward the dark side just because he's a bad guy. Like, we actually see some of the motivation for him to do to commit the acts that push him into a full-blown Sith.
Yeah, we very much see his struggle, and most of the time when he goes too far, he seems to genuinely sort of regret it. I mean, after he slaughters all of the Tusken Raiders, he has that breakdown. And I mean, that scene is pretty much the only one in this movie between him and Padme that I'm okay with. Like, I kind of get the point of the love story, and I almost understand why it is the way that it is. It's just more strain on him, which again is ultimately what leads to his turn. But generally speaking, I just think it's bad. However, yeah, that scene of him breaking down and her trying to comfort him, and he says word for word, like, I'm a Jedi, I know I should be better than this, or something like that.
Yeah.
And then the beginning of Revenge of the Sith, which obviously we'll get to next episode, but when he kills Count Dooku, he immediately is like, I shouldn't have done that, it's not the Jedi way. So
right.
You definitely see some regret.
At the same time,
so it's not like he's just going bad, immediately just doing bad things for the sake of doing bad things. Like, this is something he's struggling with. It's almost like he just has, like an anger problem or something.
But the interesting thing is, yes, he does struggle with it, and yes, I think he does acknowledge that. That's probably something I shouldn't have done. At the same time, as a viewer, I sat there in that moment and thought, no, good for you, man. Like, you were angry, and you had a right to be angry, and you killed the people who kidnapped your mother and tortured her to literal death. So, like,
that's true.
I'm rooting for him in that moment, and and maybe that makes me a terrible person. I don't know, but and then he's talking about I should be able to save her. I should be able to save people. I'm going to become powerful so that I can save people. I'm like, that's an extremely human reaction to this situation, and in many ways, I'm going to say it, and y'all probably disagree with me, but in many ways, there are moments that Anakin acts like the only human being in the film. Like, his actions are the only ones that are actually human. And so, like, who decided to send the hotshot young Jedi who literally, like sexual predator faces at Padme when he's around her? Who decides to send him with the hot young senator, whom he's obviously in love with, alone to Naboo together? That's the Jedi. That's the supposedly extremely wise council.
Was it? Or was that just more of Palpatine's manipulation? Like, that's what I couldn't tell this time. Like, he almost, with the way Ian McDermott says his lines and everything, he's almost like, he sounds like he's, the puppeteer pulling on the strings again. Oh, well, you should send someone that she knows. How about Obi-Wan and his young...
Yeah, but number one, when did Palpatine get the authority to tell the Jedi what to do? And number two, that calls into question the whole assassination attempt. So was the assassination attempt orchestrated by him actually to kill Padme, to remove her from the obstruction of the Military Creation Act, or was it to get the Jedi to agree to send an escort with her, and that being Anakin, so that he would be vulnerable and fall in love with her? And that's where I think this movie, like, from the word go, starts getting in its own way.
I think that whole plot thread is just so extremely convoluted because, as he said, why does Anakin get sent with her? If it's Palpatine making the choice to send him, then why was the assassination attempt even, like, why did that even happen? Because it seems as though the implication, once you get later on in the movie, is like the Trade Federation viceroy ordered the assassination attempt. Right. They were assisted in doing all that by Count Dooku, who's the one that hired Jango, and Count Dooku was instructed to do all that by Palpatine as Sidious. So it gets really, really messy. Like, yeah. My thing is, I wonder, did he actually want her to die? Because if she dies, then the Trade Federation droid army can attack the Republic. They have no army to defend it, so they're more easily conquered, I guess. However, if she survives, then she's there to basically tempt Anakin and get him further down the hole that Palpatine wants him in. So, like, which one is it? And that comes down, ultimately it comes down to the primary problem in this movie and really all three of the prequels, and that is that we do not get nearly enough Palpatine. Not nearly enough. Like, all of this should be spelled out. We should not have to just try to infer these things and guess at what these implications are. I mean, while some of those may be right, and yeah, it's fun to speculate and stuff, at a certain point it's like, all right, dude, this is just a mess, and you're depending on us to explain away what your poor decisions. So we needed way more Palpatine so we could really see the depth of his plan, because his whole plan is brilliant. It's so well orchestrated and put together, but it's so brilliant. It's hard to follow. Feel like I still don't know that we fully understand what his plan was, because there's so many different directions. Like, this needed to be more clearly laid out. And it kind of goes back to what we were saying about Phantom Menace in the last episode. Lucas was trying to ride this line between making a smart film and making just, a dumb popcorn entertainment film, which, yes, is doable, but that's a really hard balance to strike. He needed to go either fully, let's make a smart movie or smart trilogy of movies, or let's just make dumb entertainment. Because the result that you get is this, muddled, convoluted storyline that very quickly falls apart when you look at it closely.
It's like it's one part political thriller, but it also tries to be Transformers by the end of the movie. By the time you get to the assembly line and the arena on Geonosis, it's turned into nothing more than an action. Like, each scene is just packed with things happening and explosions, and you're supposed to marvel at it. And it's like, Nate and I, it's funny, we agree. We didn't know that we each felt this way, but we each said, going back and watching this movie, we were pretty interested up until the time that Padme and Anakin land on Geonosis. And then it lost my interest. I mean, Nate made a good point about the assembly line, the manufacturing scene. Like, that literally serves no purpose.
No, the whole thing is just so that they can get captured, and we get that one cool shot of Jango Fett landing with the jetpack and pulling out his blaster and saying, like, "Freeze, Jedi," or whatever.
Right.
And it's like, Jango, yeah, he's cool. And then you're just gonna phasma him like everybody else. All the characters that look the coolest just get killed off immediately before they can matter.
Is Jango really that cool? Because he acts pretty inept at times. I mean, when he's fighting Obi-Wan on Kamino, he has some moments where he's kind of bumbling around. Same thing goes for on Geonosis as well. Once he actually gets into the thick of things, I mean, the whole reason he dies is because he doesn't realize that his jetpack got messed up when he got trampled by the giant monster thing. Because if you notice, when Mace Windu is charging at him, he tries to take off. Like, you see his jetpack like fire for a second there, because he tries to get it to fly away so he doesn't get killed.
I've never noticed that.
And it's in that moment that he doesn't, and he's still there, defenseless, that Mace chops his head off. So
I have never noticed that.
Yeah, if you go back and watch that scene, that's exactly what happens. Like, they set it up, and it's subtle. Like, and I commend George Lucas for having the restraint to make it so subtle. But at the same time, it just shows how, like, inept Jango was as a bounty hunter.
Right. Well, also, let's talk about the fact that, like, how lazy is Count Dooku if this is the guy that you've hired to serve as the prototype for your clones? Don't you think you would hire someone else to assassinate a senator? Like, that's a pretty easy paper trail to follow.
That's true. I mean,
that's another one of the major plot points in the movie that just make no sense to me. Because, like, are we to believe that really the only reason Obi-Wan figures out about the clone army and it sets all this stuff in motion is because Dooku carelessly hires the same guy who's been, the guy that the donor for the clones to be the guy to kill Padme?
But,
and, like, if it wasn't for that, they would have never found this place.
But that's just it. That's all part of Palpy's plan. He wants the clones to be found because he wants them ready to join the Republic.
Oh my God! It goes further down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's not even completely clear who commissioned the clone army. Like,
yes.
Okay, Sifo-Dyas.
Who is
we still don't know.
Sifo-Dyas?
And
he died 10 years ago.
My thinking has always been that the implication is that Count Dooku did it either under a fake name or,
but in that case, why would he lie?
Exactly. So, I mean, I guess just to cover his tracks, maybe. I don't know. My thinking has always been that Dooku did it, and then, he was turned to the dark side before he officially left the Jedi Order. He did all that stuff that Sidious told him to do, and then he went and wiped Kamino from the Jedi archives and all that nonsense. And he ultimately he, in some capacity, was the one that commissioned the army, which Palpatine wanted him to do because then they could start the war, and then, you know, he can basically collect the galaxy. If you have all these systems at war, then when it's all said and done, you can just sort of conquer them all, and he has the perk of sort of pulling the strings on both sides. So regardless of which one wins, he comes out on top.
But
it's still like it.
Yeah, and let me chime in here that there are.
It hurts my head.
On top of that, we have no idea why the Separatists are angry enough to revolt anyway. It's never explained why they're leaving the Republic.
No, the only one that has any motivation at all is Newt Gunray and the Trade Federation, and it's just revenge against Padme. And the only reason they want that is because she defeated their blockade of her planet that they did for virtually no reason, except Palpatine told them to. And
well, but
it just
Dooku also makes
makes
it seem like part of the reason why the Trade Federation is separating is because he goes into that whole spiel about how, you know, they were working with the Dark Sith back, you know, 10 years ago.
Yeah, they were once in league with this Darth Sidious.
And he turned on them, and so now they want to, and so they came to him, and he's defecting for that reason. So it goes back to Alex's point, like, is that his true motivation, or is he just lying?
But if that's the case, then we need to know more about Dooku. Why on earth would they just go to this random old dude who just happens to be Palpatine's apprentice at this time? Like,
that kind of makes
who is he that warrants them, you know, going to him to seek out, you know, the means to separate from the Republic?
Yeah, and also that makes
creates
Newt
a whole
Gunray
other problem.
kind of a good guy.
In a way, yeah.
Like, the whole thing is pretty screwy when you really get into it. The Dooku character is so like, I can't tell what side he's on, and so back to Padme. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. But back to Padme. So we hear early on that Padme is the lead opposition to the Military Creation Act. So the Republic is trying to get the authority to create a Republic army to fight this threat of the Separatists. Number one, Padme, one would think, would be like one of the chief proponents of an army, considering her planet was recently invaded and there was no one there to help her but a bunch of like cartoon reptiles. Number two, she being the opponent of a Military Creation Act, it seems like that would work in the Separatists' favor, that the Republic not have an army. Mm-hmm. So if I'm every other member of the Separatists' leadership, I'd be saying like, no, hold on, why are we assassinating her? She's like our best player in this fight. So then you have
because like I said, if she lives and, you know, continues to oppose the creation of an army for the Republic, then they don't have an army, and they're more easy to conquer or take over, or to at least secede from.
Yep.
But the whole purpose for the clone troopers existing is the catalyst for the stormtroopers. They are how the stormtroopers started. Even though when the stormtroopers come around, they're not clones anymore. All the clones have been decommissioned by this point. So it's literally the only purpose of the clones existing to begin with is so we can see that armor. So we can see this is what the stormtroopers started as, and they evolved from there.
And why, by the end of the movie, are the Jedi given the roles of military leadership? Like, these guys are not tacticians. They did not go to the military academies. Why are they the generals in this new army? Nothing in this freaking universe makes any sense.
No, because you also have them talking about how, you know, they're spread so thin and everything, and yet somehow they're able to get so many of them together to fight on Geonosis at once. And, like, how did they get all of them together? Weren't they off doing more important things at that time?
Right, and then they all get killed.
Yeah, so then the numbers get thinned even more.
Like the Jedi come off as like complete dunces in this movie at many different times. Palpatine is basically telling them what to do, and they are just going along with it. Yoda says multiple times that they don't know what's going on because the dark side is shrouding everything.
Yeah, you have that weird line from Mace Windu where he's like, "We need to inform the Senate that our ability to sense the Force has diminished." And it's like, no, why would you do that? Like, why wouldn't you just try to fix it? Like, because as soon as you do that, you're going to lose all credibility. I mean, I appreciate the honesty, but come on, man.
All I know is, like, Padme and Anakin at a lake cabin in the beautiful pastoral Naboo country.
Which was, Italy here, so that just puts it in perspective.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this is a recipe for unplanned pregnancy. Like,
especially with Annie looking at her the way he does. I mean, my gosh, man. Also, why can't they take a real spaceship back to Naboo? Why do they have to take the bus? Why do they have to slum it back? Who knows? Oh, but speaking of slumming it, just on a side note, one of the things that I love about this movie is how when they go back to Tatooine, Watto is like a bum now.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't have his big fancy shop, and he's not all clean and everything. He's just got this little tent that he's under, and he's got like all the stubble and everything. He's just some bum now. Like, it's just great because he lost everything.
The droid head for a hat.
Yeah, because he lost everything in the pod race, so of course he's a nobody now. But
he wants Anakin's help, like beating some people up,
just to get some money.
I hate sand. It's coarse and rough, and it gets everywhere.
Also, I never realized how out of left field that line comes. Like, I've known it, and I knew I hated it, and I knew it was terribly delivered, but it's also totally out of left field.
I know, because, like, Padme's having this nice, stroll down memory lane talking about going swimming, and, like, I don't know.
I hate sand.
Laying out in the sun with her friends and everything, and he's just he butts into the conversation just to complain.
Sand.
Yeah, dude, like, this gorgeous woman is telling you about laying out in the sand, presumably scantily clad, and you're thinking about your disdain for sand right now.
Your crappy upbringing.
If nothing else, this completely contradicts your entire character, because the whole thing is you're this like pervy, like neck deep in puberty kid, but now all of a sudden, like, here's your chance, and you're like, oh, Sam.
Yeah, that's...
Oh, I will say, hold on, let me add something here. Speaking of that, I never noticed that, like, they have that agreement that they're not going to fall in love because it'd be forbidden, and, like, I've never noticed that Anakin was actually prepared to keep that agreement, because at the end, when she's like, I love you, he's like, wait, you do? I thought we agreed.
Wait, we're doing this?
I thought
what?
we agreed we weren't doing this. And I was like, whoa, like, poor guy. Like, he totally
being strung all over the place.
Right, he was prepared to turn it off. And then she's like, psych, we're about to die. Turns out I love you. But then they don't die. And it's like, oh.
So then she's stuck with them.
You're kind of a psycho, but I'm into it. Obi-Wan and Jango Fett. Oh, so yeah, that's awesome. That's really awesome. But I noticed there are things that I've not noticed before, like callbacks to Empire, because it's like a poem. It rhymes.
Yeah, I noticed that this time too.
There are several things that I never really noticed that like are direct, corollaries to Empire Strikes Back, which I thought was kind of fun.
So, what are some examples of that? 'Cause at least off the top of my head, I can't think of any.
Yeah,
the only callback that I know of directly in this movie is when Obi-Wan cuts off Sam Wessel's arm. He does this same sort of motion that Alec Guinness does in A New Hope, which is brilliant. But that's just because Ewan McGregor's a brilliant person. He's the highlight of this movie for me.
Well, at
actually,
one time,
the entire prequel trilogy, he's the best part. Him and Natalie Portman.
Obi-Wan winds up hanging upside down from a city that is suspended above a planet's surface, or at least hanging from a city that's on Camino. He winds up hanging from the platform on Camino. You have the slave one, of course. You have the Fets.
Which, if you notice, they do lay back in those chairs. They're not on a swivel or anything like that.
They do. Yeah, they do lay back.
That's a callback to our previous episode. Go check it out if you haven't already.
You have the asteroid field chase, in which Obi-Wan shakes his pursuer by latching onto the back of something.
Yep.
To hide, just like the Millennium Falcon.
Okay.
You have Anakin get his hand cut off, which is obviously just like Luke getting his hand cut off.
Well, going back to the asteroid field, Obi-Wan dumps his trash as a tactic.
He does. You're
He
right.
does do that.
You're absolutely right. I didn't even notice that one. Let's see. There are more. Let me think about it.
It's just like a poem.
It rhymes.
I know, but it's great because they're subtle. They're not winking at you every time that they do them.
Yeah, it's not crammed down your throat.
Well, I mean, except for the obvious ones, like, yes, Anakin getting his arm chopped off or whatever.
His arm cut off. Yeah.
There are plenty of a lot more subtle
Well, there's the whole like kind of forbidden love between Anakin and Leia, or not Leia, Anakin and Padme, which is akin to like Han Solo and Leia in Empire.
Yeah, the way it's not, it really isn't supposed to happen because they're from two totally different walks of life.
Yeah, but it winds up, them kind of falling for each other on this sort of adventure. I just thought it was very clever, and I enjoyed catching those little things this time around.
Mm-hmm. For sure. But let's talk about that a little bit more. Because obviously one of the big critiques of this movie is that whole representation of the relationship between Anakin and Padme. And I was kind of curious. I started doing this myself, kind of comparing and contrasting that to Han Solo and Leia and their relationship and everything, because I know yes, there are some similarities, but it's also very different. Because, like, for me, yes, I felt like a lot of times George Lucas was trying to mirror that, or at least call back to it. So, yes, you have that moment where Anakin and Padme are kind of squabbling and everything, which I assume is supposed to be kind of a callback to when Han and Leia are kind of, like, arguing throughout Empire. But, of course, when Han and Leia do it, it doesn't come off awkward or anything like it does in this movie. I mean, there are plenty of times where, like, Anakin's acting, I don't know, so childish or something like that. I mean, everybody else around just kind of looks on like, what the crap is going on? Yeah,
Anakin definitely makes things uncomfortable more than once in this movie. He kind of has a little fit, even like on Tatooine with, like, in front of... his new family members. Like, he definitely makes it uncomfortable, and you kind of see them looking at each other at times like, oh, this guy is a little psycho.
Yeah, no wonder Owen and Beru are so concerned about Luke having too much of his father in him.
Yeah. Also, I love that they made Beru have an English accent, even though she says like one line, but she doesn't. And I love that they basically, it's just the Tatooine set and kitchen from A New Hope. Like, it's exactly the same, down to that weird, almost like rug painting on the roof of the dining room.
Yup, it's so cool.
I love that. And Klieg Lars, like, that guy did a great job as that character.
Yeah, like, he's a gnarly dude, and you get he definitely plays up. I mean, obviously his injury and everything, but just what life must be like, especially now for someone who's disabled, living in that environment in just the sand plains of Tatooine.
Yeah.
But yeah, on the note of the guy that plays Klieg Lars and things that are good about this movie, what are some other good ones? 'Cause I mean, I know at the beginning of this episode, you guys I won't say you were defending the movie, but you were definitely talking about how it's not as bad as you remember. So, what are some of the pros to this movie?
I definitely took down some notes on some of the things that I enjoy about it. And I mean, sometimes it's just little petty things like, at the beginning when you have that big old Naboo ship coming into Coruscant and you see all the low-hanging clouds with just like the tops of the spires peeking through and everything. Like, those are some pretty cool shots. Like, I like that idea of getting to see Coruscant under those conditions.
Yeah, I know exactly what shot you're talking about, and it almost brings Superman to mind for me. Like, this just looks like Metropolis in space, which is a very cool idea to me.
Well, okay, so I'm going through my notes, and so it's a mixture of the good and the bad. Something else kind of superficial, but I felt like them having a changeling in there was totally underused. Like, what was the point of her being a changeling if you're not actually going to do something cool with it? Like, I was very disappointed that it was just kind of a throwaway line that, oh, I think she's a changeling.
Well, I think the whole purpose of that is just basically just a plot device to make her blend in better in the bar.
Then it's just
But I don't know, 'cause
lazy
there are all
writing.
sorts of aliens in there. Yeah, there are all sorts of aliens.
And
in
you
there, so
see,
she
and you
wouldn't
see
really
her a
stick out
couple of
anywhere.
times too, when she didn't change. She was still herself.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
True.
I don't get that. I mean, I like the small little touch where, when Anakin and Padme are in her room after she survived the assassination attempt by the giant poisonous slug things, or centipedes, or whatever they were. How the establishing shot outside, you see the little window replacement droids starting their work and everything, replacing that window pane that Obi-Wan jumped out of. And then, of course, you see them in the background inside the room as well, finishing up their job before they go away. So, I mean, that's just a nice little touch because you didn't have to put that in there, but it's just good, I guess, for the world building to have that little detail.
Which also plays into the fact of, like, how cool is it to see Obi-Wan Kenobi dive through a window and then hang from a droid as it zooms through the Coruscant skies. Like,
even though it makes no
that's a cool
sense
idea.
for him to do that, because how did he know he was
Not
going to
at
be
all.
able... I mean, aside from the Force, how did he know he was going to be able to land and not die jumping through a window?
because he's Obi-Wan Kenobi. Nobody asks, oh, well, why did Batman do this? How did Batman do this? Because he's Batman. It's the same thing. Because he's Obi-Wan Kenobi. He can just do that.
Hello there. I thought I appreciate that we get a little bit of a glimpse as like possibly terrible as the scene in Dexter's or Dexter, whatever his name is, in Dex's diner. As like,
isn't Dexter Jester?
pretty, I think so. It's
Yes.
like as American graffiti as that is. Sorry if you hear the dog barking. That's a total, kind of an American graffiti shot, but we get a small glimpse into this world pre-Empire, and I think that's kind of interesting.
That, and it's one of our few looks into what life is like on Coruscant for people that aren't in the government or aren't part of the Jedi Order. Just the regular everyday dude. Like, this guy owns a restaurant that he himself works in.
Yeah.
So, and it also makes me, it gives me the idea that, because Obi-Wan knows him so well, maybe this is like Obi-Wan's regular lunch spot,
Well,
which is kind of a cool idea.
I'm glad you said that, because that's another thing that I liked about it, that we see Obi-Wan is basically kind of a detective, and he's kind of like working a beat. And so we get the idea that like Obi-Wan's days and the days of the Jedi are kind of spent solving these types of problems. So they definitely have these networks of sources who feed them information, and that they use to, track down information and things. And I like that. I like that we kind of we get to see where Leia's spunk comes from. That her mom, that Padme's she's kind of a tough gal, and your orders are to protect me. And so if I go to Geonosis, that's where you have to go too. I like that. I think the Jedi Starfighter is really cool. The Slave One is really cool, and that battle is really cool.
Yeah,
and it holds up
in the
well.
asteroid field.
Yeah, the looks of that hold up really well, even all this time later.
And that plays into one thing that we discussed earlier today as well. The CGI in this movie is not good.
It's not.
It's bad.
Yeah, going back and
But you
watching
have
it
to
this
keep
time, what I kept thinking of is the TV show Once Upon a Time, because that show is known for a lot of their flashbacks, basically just putting their actors just in a green screen room and then filling it in with CGI after the fact. And that's what it felt like a lot of times in this.
And it's on a terrible TV budget.
Like inside the Jedi Temple at times. I mean, that whole factory
what
scene.
I think you have to be sort of cognizant of when thinking about that is that this movie came out in 2002, and so in a lot of ways it benefited from the standard definition TVs, or at least, I mean, maybe at best the early generations of HD TVs. But if I were to go home and get my VHS tape of this movie and pop it into a VCR, and I mean maybe even on an HD TV, just that I don't want to say primitive, but that particular medium does this movie a lot of favors because it sort of mats everything out and the cartoons don't look so cartoony.
Yeah.
It's just when you remaster these films in HD and you throw this up on a 4K TV, all of a sudden these characters that are supposed to be three-dimensional look awfully two-dimensional.
No, that's a fair point, because I would say I've experienced the same thing with the Lord of the Rings trilogy. As good as that was for its time, it does suffer the same problems where once you put it in high definition, you do see more of those edges because they don't get blurred as much with the SD. To
kind of bring it back to the original thought there, I think the thing that I find most fulfilling, that there are two things that I find the most fulfilling about this movie, and it's that we get to see, for all this movie's faults, and there are a lot of them. But for all those faults, seeing Anakin's digression, and if I stop and think as I'm watching the movie that this is the guy who becomes Darth Vader, there are moments that his digression into Vader makes sense, and it not only makes sense, but I'm empathetic for him, and watching him try to kind of hold it together at times. And Hayden Christensen obviously gets a lot of flack, and some of it rightfully deserved. But for the first time watching this movie, I kind of felt like he at the same time does a decent job at moments of portraying Anakin as a pretty tortured guy. Especially there's one shot particularly when he finds his mother and then he kills all of the sand people, and he comes back to the Lars homestead, and he's carrying her body, which is wrapped up in a bag, and everybody's out there, nobody says anything, and the way he looks at them, it's very much I took care of this, and I went and got my mother, which none of you would do. And there's definitely you can see fear on all of their faces, because it's we messed up. We let his mom get kidnapped and killed. And the way he and it's a brief moment, but the way he looks at them, you're dang, he kind of wants to kill them too.
Just pure resentment toward these people that were supposed to be her new family.
Yeah, he's angry. And then when he's in, I love that they use the garage, that we see Luke in A New Hope, and he's having this conversation like life is simple when you're fixing things, and why can I fix things? And like we kind of see him mentally coming apart at the seams, and like it makes sense that a guy who goes through that ultimately turns to anger, and like it makes sense that he turns to he has to feel those broken places with something, and he chooses to fill them with hatred. And but that's human of him. Like, it may not make him a good Jedi, but it makes him a really good human. And you watch that and you go, man, I'm not sure that I wouldn't have been the exact same way, that I wouldn't have felt the exact same way. And like, he's with this beautiful woman who's into him, and he falls in love with her. Like, Anakin's like a total human being, whereas you could argue none of the rest of the Jedi ever act human. They act very cold, and indifferent and disinterested in these human tastes. And so I like that Anakin. I like that Anakin is a guy that is definitely flawed, but I can at least follow the logic of why he does what he does.
Yeah, I think you have a point. It's very easy to see, when you go back and watch this one, and as well as Revenge of the Sith, and even back to Phantom Menace, him leaving his mother. It's not like he just went bad one day, it's not even that he had, like he had, dark side tendencies or anything. He was literally driven to that point by this particular sequence of events, and it all kind of goes back to what you mentioned at the beginning of the episode of him leaving his mother and joining the Jedi Order at such an old age. He was old enough to remember her, and so he'd already developed that attachment, and so that's an emotion that he feels that I think a lot of other Jedi, I don't want to say they don't necessarily feel it, but they are able to sort of turn it off.
Yeah.
Because they've never had that the way that Anakin has. Whereas for him, that's a much stronger emotion, and so that makes it harder for him to let go of his mother before she dies, and it makes him, angrier after she dies. I think it's equal parts, which, I mean, he pretty, he says it, it's easier when fixing things, why couldn't I fix this, whatever, he blames himself for her death and all of that, and that ultimately makes it harder for him to let go when he foresees Padme's death. Yoda tells him, just you can't focus on that. People die. It's just the way that it is. You have to learn to let it go, and he can't do that because he's already familiar with that emotion because of his mother and all this other stuff that's happened to him. So it's very easy to see why he was driven to the point that he is.
Also, we hear in episode 3, Obi-Wan says, "I have failed you." And I've always taken that as just like, that's just what all teachers say whenever things go bad. But in Attack of the Clones, Obi-Wan definitely does fail him. Like, Obi-Wan knows Anakin has feelings for Padme, and he points it out several times in the movie. You're letting your feelings get in the way, or your feelings betray you, or your feelings for her, or, he points out several times that he recognizes that Anakin has strong feelings for Padme, even borderline romantic feelings. Yet he still lets him go on this like retreat. He doesn't know where they're going, but he still lets him accompany her alone back to Naboo. He's still like
knowing the risk.
Knowing the risk, like he totally dismisses. I've never noticed until now, but like when Anakin says something about I forget what it was. Maybe it was the dream. Was it a nightmare? It was nightmares. Yeah, like Obi-Wan totally dismisses it and says like, well, dreams pass. And it's like he doesn't take it seriously, and he even by the end, like when they're going to fight Dooku, Padme, the ship gets hit, Padme falls out, and Anakin goes hysterical. Like, that was clear right then that these two have strong feelings for one another. And, like, Obi-Wan should have, at that moment, been like, whoa, 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 what's going on? Like, you need to tell me exactly what's going on here.
Well, do you think it has anything to do with the fact that, he's watched Anakin grow up. He knows how much Anakin has missed his mother, how much that loss of her has hurt him. So do you think there's a part of him that thinks, well, since he can't have his mother in his life, then it's okay for him to have this other relationship with a woman in his life, that it works as a surrogate relationship that will help fill that hole and that will help to keep him from the dark side?
Well, it's really
That's a good
funny
point.
because Obi-Wan at one point even says to Anakin, you've made a commitment to the Jedi, and that commitment includes like not being in love with a woman. So you could probably get out of it, but it's not easy to do. So like he's acknowledging that very thing. So it's like he talks out of both sides of his mouth on this issue. On the one hand, like as you said, it's like he lets it slide. Like he sees it but turns a blind eye and kind of lets it go, while at the same time like kind of chiding Anakin and being like, don't get too attached to her. Don't get too attached to her. But like, he doesn't actually do anything to stop it. And then, of course, the fight with Dooku, like, Anakin's totally undisciplined and gets his hand cut off.
Speaking of Dooku again.
But if it weren't for all that, then we wouldn't get that Yoda fight, which obviously is a little ridiculous, kind of absurd.
But it's fun.
But it's also
But it's just fun.
But it's also awesome. Yeah, like if someone were to try to break that down to me and explain to me all of the problems with that fight, I would be willing to almost guarantee that I would agree with every single one of those points. However, there's still the fact of we just watched Yoda fight.
Yeah.
We wanted that for how long?
I wish they would have saved
finally
that
got it
until Revenge, though. I do wish they
if
would
he
have
had
saved
just
it
fought
until Revenge.
Sidious. That's true, but at the same time, it's such a brief fight that he has with Dooku that I feel like when it ends, you still kind of want more of it. So I think they balanced it out okay. You get just enough of a taste of it, because it's not his fight with Dooku is not this big grand spectacle like his fight with Palpatine is.
And I've never noticed that Yoda is kind of arrogant in Attack of the Clones. Like, he has moments of arrogance, and he talks down to Dooku. Much to learn you still have, and you can see Dooku getting kind of like frustrated that he's not being taken seriously, but Yoda does not take him seriously. And I think it's interesting to see that, like, maybe, and I don't like the Last Jedi, but maybe what Luke is saying in the Last Jedi is kind of true, in that, like, the Jedi at the height of their power kind of screwed the pooch on this one.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
Nate, do you kind of just want to lead us into closing remarks?
Well, I was just going to say, we keep talking about Count Dooku this whole time. But one of the things that I love is Christopher Lee, the man behind Dooku. Just his delivery of some of his lines, his mannerisms, whole nine yards. I mean, he just brings so much class, but also he also makes him very vile at times, too. Like,
Yeah.
you just love to hate him at times.
He has a great villain voice.
Yeah, he does.
Like, I mean, think about, he's Saruman in Lord of the Rings, and it's very much the same thing. Like, this guy is so easy to hate, and a lot of it comes down to that Christopher Lee, like, baritone voice that he has.
But at the same time,
they just
he also comes off like, when he's appealing to Obi-Wan, he comes off like very, sympathetic too. You almost...
That's true
like
too.
he's very convincing to where you don't know if he's lying or if he's actually telling the truth. Like his range is just so good throughout the whole thing. He just has this elegance. He definitely feels like a count. Like he just has there's just something about his demeanor and the way he carries himself.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I'm a big fan of the Mosquito King. Dude's got his
Are they mosquitoes or termites?
Dude's got a Death Star.
Which, that reminds me. From that readout, like, is the Death Star fully designed at that point?
Yes.
So then what's the point of what's-his-face in Rogue One coming along and putting in...
You're asking...
wasn't he supposed to help
too
design
many
it?
questions.
I don't think it was fully designed. I think they had the basic idea of what it would be, but it's not.
It was like
I don't think they have all the engineering.
It's like an architectural rendering of like a new shopping mall. They're like people with no faces walking out with bags and like cars in the parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
And here's where we're gonna have the cafe area.
And this is where we're gonna have the planet-destroying weapon.
Oh, that's why.
It was very much like this is how big it's gonna be, and it's gonna do this somehow.
Also, how did if that was a separatist idea, how did it wind up being a republic or an imperial construction?
And this goes back to the beginning of the episode. Not enough Palpatine. Yes. The whole plan is not laid out enough.
No.
The Empire, which was the Republic first, takes the plans for this weapon that were created by the Separatists.
Who may or may not be the bad guys.
But what?
Yeah.
In a way, if you think about it hard enough, it's not difficult to see that maybe the Separatists are actually the good guys here. And I think in a lot of ways they are, because in the Separatists, I don't know that it's ever explicitly stated anywhere or anything like that, but I think the Separatist movement was a big inspiration for the Rebel Alliance. So, there's not really a clear good and bad here.
You might say there are heroes on both sides.
Because it's just not, as I said earlier, I don't want everything in most movies. I don't want everything specifically spelled out. That just leads to exposition and telling instead of showing and whatever. But sometimes you need to tell us things, and when you have a plan this complicated and this convoluted, we need to see more of this to see exactly how it's supposed to go, instead of sitting here poring over this information trying to make heads or tails of it.
So my closing thoughts would be, this is a movie in which nothing makes sense, and I have no idea who is motivated by what, and I don't know what's going on. I still don't know who Master Sifo-Dyas was. I don't know who had the clone army created. I don't know if Dooku's a good guy or a bad guy. I don't know if he was pretending to be Sifo-Dyas. I don't know why he used Jango Fett to try to kill Padme, who was actually working in the Separatist good, but they tried to have her killed anyway. Obi-Wan and the rest of the Jedi totally set Anakin up to fail, and he does fail, of course. He falls in love, and they get married for some reason at the end instead of just living secret lives, and everything about it and the plot and the story are absolutely ridiculous. However, this movie was close to being really good. and with some discipline in the editing suite, it could have really been a great movie. And
or even just some discipline in the screenwriting room.
yeah, with more
Which-
Palpatine, less useless action, more exposition of some of the elements. I, for the first time, watched this movie, and I feel like I glimpsed George Lucas's vision, and it was like 80% of the way there. And it's a shame. It's a shame because it could have been great. Could have been great.
Totally agree.
Yep.
But my closing thoughts on it would be, again, the Yoda fight with Count Dooku. Like, that still gets me excited. Like, seeing Yoda like flip around and fighting is just like, wow, for a frail old goblin, he's killing it. Like, that homeboy's in shape. I do really like Obi-Wan's story arc in here. Like, yes, him letting Anakin go off on his own with Padme was just a stupid bonehead decision. Like, yeah, you definitely failed him. That was a terrible idea. You should have known how that was going to go. But if you just look at his mission in general, I feel like he's the only real, like, noble hero in this movie. Like, everything that he does, like, his motivations are clear. Like, he's just trying to track down Jango Fett to figure out who is trying to kill Padme, because that's his job. Like, dude is just doing his job, and he just happens to stumble across all these other things, and in the process begins investigating them too, because it's just the right thing to do. Like, he's just a good guy. So everything with that is great. Ewan McGregor's awesome. I'll sing that dude's praises till the day I die. And then Natalie Portman is Padme. A+ there. Like, my first
Smoke
crush.
show.
Let's like, great casting choice there. And I 100% mean that. Like, that was a very, very good idea.
Yeah.
But then just the ham-fisted, like, just shoved in like, the half-hearted romance is just, I hate it. I kind of understand why it is that way sometimes, but for the most part, just, if all of those scenes were just gone, I think this movie would be much more enjoyable for me.
All right, so there we go. We have Star Wars Episode 2. Not as bad as you may think it is. It does have some, fun moments, some fan service and things like that. Some potential, it just wasn't fully maximized. So that's all we got for this one, and so come on back for Star Wars Episode 3.
And we'll sell you some death sticks if you really want.
All right, we'll take it easy, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye, Felicia.
It would just be Count Dooku. Or
Also,
what is his first name?
exactly.
Like, he has a first name. I just don't remember what it is. But, like, he's called
Jim Dooku.